Hi, welcome back to the hills. This is episode 3 of the A.M.M.O Podcast. And if you're just now tuning in to the podcast or just now seeing this, the last podcast that I did, I spoke quite thoroughly while being very lucrative at the same time on turkey calling here in Appalachia. And I hinted on one of the most important aspects of before you even call is to scout the area, to have woodsmanship skills, know where those turkeys are before you even get into calling, because there's really no point in being proficient in any type of calling if you don't know where the animal is to begin with. And that doesn't just go for turkeys. That goes with any game animal that you're going to hunt throughout all of the world. So scouting and woodsmanship skills are always going to be the most important aspects to any hunt. If you don't know where the animal is, or even a worst case scenario than that, let's say you go down to a river bottom and you're thinking to yourself, this looks like a really great place to hunt and it's beautiful and something that you would have seen on the Outdoor Channel or your favorite hunter on YouTube or whatever the case is. And you get down there and you call and you call and you call and there's no response, or you're deer hunting and you're not seeing the action that you want to see. Well, it probably boils down to the fact that the animal isn't there, and you could have went ahead and knocked that little cove off, or that little river bottom, or that mountaintop, or that finger ridge, or whatever the case is if you had preemptively gone in and done the scouting beforehand. But let's just say you're tuning into this podcast and this is your first season ever turkey hunting in your entire life. You didn't have anyone to bring you up in it. Be it a family member or a friend. You don't have friends that do it, and the only information that you're getting is here on the internet. That can be a daunting task of, okay, I know that I need to go scout, but how do I scout, right? And the tips that I'm about to explain, I would say that for the majority of North America, these tips will be applicable. It's not just here in the mountains, because these are very, very simple things that you can start doing habitually between seasons, before seasons, and even during season that are going to give you success. And the more that you do it, the more your eyes are going to be open, the more your senses are going to be hyper aware, if you will. And the easier it's going to be to build those habits of looking for the sign, the animal itself, or whatever the telltale is in the scouting that you're doing. So let's stop walking around in circles and get into it. I think one of the most overlooked and underutilized aspects in scouting is road scouting. Okay. I don't care if you're elk shape. Shout out to that dude. He's a stud. Cameron Haynes. I don't care if you're an Olympic athlete. Your feet are never going to be able to cover the ground that a vehicle can. Now, let me just pause there. I'm not telling you to, push for four-wheelers on public land or anything of that nature. I mean, if you've got it where you've got it, great. But I'm more or less speaking of public roads, highways, back roads, dirt roads, something that the average Joe Blow, the mailman's going to drive down. Those roads can give you so much information. I'll give you an example. There's a piece of public that I hunt pretty close to me. It's about a 30-minute drive from where I am right now. And the public is divided because it was basically just some farmland. The family didn't want to keep it anymore, but they didn't want it to turn into subdivisions. It was split up all throughout the mountains, like a lot of these properties around here are. And they ended up selling it to the state to turn into game lands, and they had wrote it out. And it's an amazing piece of property. The state of North Carolina actually does a wonderful job maintaining it and making it a really great habitat for many, many wild animals. But just so happens it is one of my favorite places to turkey hunt. And one of the easiest ways to scout it is from the road, because how the property breaks up and the way that the road runs through the terrain, you're able to see the backside. Now, granted, a lot of times you're looking at the private, but don't think that just because you cannot hunt that property, that it's not telling you something. Back to that example, one of the pieces that I hunt on that property, there is a giant cow pasture that backs up to the back of the public, and it makes for a perfect roost zone for turkeys. Well, obviously, they're going to work out into that roost zone. They typically don't pitch straight into it. They'll fly down, they'll do their morning routine, and then they'll work out into that roost zone, and they'll come back in during the day. So preseason, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll drive the road past that pasture just to see where they're dipping in at, and hopefully get an idea of where the turkeys are roosting in the evening time. Or if, I'm there around midday, I can see where they're trying to dip back into the wood line when that middle of the day sun and those middle day temperatures comes in, and they're, wanting to get back into the tree line for the cover of shade and to get cool, and so on and so forth. So keep that in mind, as you're setting up, if you're a new hunter and you're thinking about hunting A, B, C, or D public land, go drive around it. You might only be able to drive to one place of it, and that's fine. That's another benefit of road scouting is you're going to learn a lot of your access points. You're going to learn where you can get in, which is going to help you, A, to be able to get in yourself, and B, it's going to show you, okay, if this is a really easy spot to get into, and I know that this property is going to produce quite a few animals. I know that, Billy Bob is probably going to be here on Saturday morning, right? And he's probably going to have his kids. So maybe I should look for something a little bit more secluded. And you're going to find that out with your road scouting. So give it a shot. It's not going to be like your final judgment on the property. If you drive by a piece of property and you don't see a single, bird or deer, whatever it is you're scouting here in this situation, I'm talking specifically about turkeys. So if you drive past a piece of property and you don't see a single turkey, that does not mean that there's not turkeys on the property. It just means you don't see them there at that moment. So don't give up on it, but utilize that scouting. Another great aspect of driving around, especially if you're in like rural farm country, or honestly anywhere, but this is more applicable to that, where you're driving past these farms that are butting up to public property and you see turkeys out there, and then you drive another 100 yards down the road and you see the farmer sitting out there. Well, if you've got the courage, you just pull down his driveway and you have a conversation with him, and you can potentially get permission or intel, just, hey, have you seen turkeys here? Do you know where they leave your property at? And just striking up conversation with people. That's probably one of my favorite aspects of hunting, is just being able to have conversations with other human beings about this lifestyle that I love. There's some prime example of that. There was a farmer in eastern Tennessee where I was hunting a couple years ago, and I drove past his field. And I saw a beautiful tom. I mean, this dude was putting on the show. He strutted up. He had 3 hens around him, and I knew he wasn't coming off that private. So I saw the farmer out there, and I just swung it in, and I said, hey, there's a turkey out there. Would you mind if I chased him? He's absolutely, man, go for it. So we went after the bird. Long story short, didn't end up harvesting that bird. But when it was all said and done, I got to just basically come back and talk to the old man, and he taught me a lot of life lessons, that were not necessarily related to hunting, but I would have never got that information had I not been out cruising, looking for turkeys, and then, had the courage to pull in there and just have a conversation with the guy. And that's what it is. It's just a conversation. Yes, no, maybe. On the hunting, that's all irrelevant. I built a connection. I built a relationship, and I was able to have great conversation with that gentleman. So that's just some food for thought on there. But going back to what I was saying on you not seeing animals there, not being the telltale sign, you will never be able to replace, as much as, like going back to my earlier example of you're never going to cover the ground that you could in a vehicle. You're also never going to replace the information that you're going to get with boots on the ground. Right. So let's say you're driving around, you've you've either spotted something, or your interest is piqued on a piece of property, or maybe that's just the only piece of property you have to hunt. Okay, so even if you don't see turkeys out on while road scouting, it doesn't matter because that's all you have. Okay, which is fine. That's not the end of the road for you, but you got to get out there and you got to put your feet on the ground. Okay, this is where people get a little bit tripped up, because there is such a thing as doing too much, especially if you're right, on the cusp. Like here, I've got, I think, 3 weeks until we go live, and then I'll be down in South Carolina here in 2 weeks. So, I mean, I got to be careful how much pressure I do. I heard a biologist the other night speaking on a mature tom, so a 3-year-old turkey is usually on the average going to have about 6 or 7 dominant or predominant roost sites, meaning those 6 or 7 places is where he wants to put his head, okay, when he goes to bed at night. And if you go in there and you booger that, and he knows that you've been in there and he feels pressured, he will, there's a high likelihood that he's going to boogie on out of there, and he's not coming back to that roost site for the rest of the season, if at all in his life. So keep that in the back of your mind as I go through this. Of, you definitely want to get the intelligence that you need to be successful, to know where the animals are, to just all around know the lay of the land. At the same token, you have to be careful when you put that pressure on them and how much pressure you're putting on them. And that's more or less going to be like your evening and your morning times. If you pie face one at 10 o'clock in the morning, you should be okay. But, those roost sites, you got to be real careful with. So when I'm out and I'm scouting, what am I looking for? And if you've been into hunting at all, this might be a pretty, self-explanatory thing, but I'm going to treat it like you've never scouted before in your life. Food, shelter, cover, okay, and water are the primary resources for all living creatures, right? So food and water. Cover is a little bit funky with a turkey, because the turkey, I was always taught as a kid, turkeys don't like thick stuff, like real thick, tall briar. But I'm telling you, I've been in some thick stuff with some Easterns. So I'm not going to treat that like the gospel, and I'm not going to harp on that one too much. But food and water. So springtime food, what are we after? That all really depends on your area. And it also depends on, what time of the year your season starts. So that is something that you need to do a little bit of research in before you put your boots on the ground and figure out what your turkeys have to eat. Are they primarily eating bugs, grasses? What are they eating at that time of year in your specific location? And then once you find that answer, what that resource is, you need to try to locate that. And there's several ways you can do that. Technology is an amazing thing. You can basically Google search anything in 2025, and it'll, hey, where is such and such plant growing in my area at this time of year? And 99% of the time, you can find a resource to get it, one that works for you, one that you're comfortable navigating. Me personally, I use Onyx a lot, and it gives me a lot of the things that I'm looking for here in Appalachia. So maybe, if you're thinking about hunting here in the mountains, maybe you think of that, or like I said, just Google it, and you'll be able to figure out within a relatively quick amount of time where those resources are going to be at in your particular region. But it's definitely something you want to key in on, is those food sources. Now, why am I keying in on the food sources when the gobblers are chasing the hens? Well, the hens are chasing the food sources, right? The hens are definitely trying to bulk up on those nutrients, yada, yada. So just keep that in mind as you're going through it. How do I know when I'm in it? So I'm usually looking for the obvious signs of turkeys. I'm usually looking for turkey tracks, okay? Turkey scat. And I would highly recommend, just type in a quick little Google search on turkey scat. And if you've got a color printer, print that dude off and literally keep it in your pocket when you're first starting out. That way, when you run up on scat in the woods, you can pull that photo out and look and be like, yep, that's it, or no, that's not. And I would also do the same thing with a tom turkey track. Depending on where you are, I mean, the toms and the hens, yes, they can look the same. You've got the whole 4-inch rule and you've got the whole back toe rule. It also depends on the ground, so on and so forth. Basically, look for a turkey track. I don't get wrapped up in, is this a tom, is this a hen? All I want to know is that a turkey track or not? Because if it's a turkey track, I know if it's a hen, there's probably going to be a tom around. If not, I know that I can maybe move 100 yards one way or another and be into that tom's domain. That tom's not going to let that hen get too terribly far from them. So keeping those two in the back of your mind when you're out there looking for sign is a wonderful habit to get yourself into. And that's not just during, your preseason turkey scouting. I'm typically doing that during, right at the end of deer season as they're starting to transition into their spring ranges. I'll do it throughout the summer just so I can build up a repertoire of knowledge of where they are, which I'll get to that here in a minute. But basically, I'm constantly looking for it. My brain is weird. My brain is constantly, when I'm out, most people are looking for flowers and bird watching, and I'm bird watching, but I'm the bird I'm watching is turkeys. And I'm also looking for deer track, and I'm looking for bear track. And the more and more you get into, and if turkey is your only thing, good on you, because all you're going to be looking for is turkey sign year round. But if you hunt multiple species, your brain's going to start going, oh, okay, what are we doing here? What are we looking for today? But it's a pretty cool thing, though, whenever it starts becoming, second nature for you. And then besides scat and turkey tracks, I'm looking for turkey scratch. It takes a little bit to actually be able to pick up on it here in these hills, because a lot of times our squirrels will actually, especially right before spring turkey season, whenever they're starting to try to dig up the acorns and such that they buried during the fall, they will, or even look for old stuff if it was a really hard winter. They'll kick a lot of leaves up, and once you've picked up, once you've gotten built an eye for turkey scratch, you'll very quickly be able to tell the difference between the two. But I always kind of try to warn newer turkey hunters, be careful with going strictly off scratch. If you've got, scratch sign and a turkey print, or a turkey track, that is, yeah, absolutely. You can be 99.9% sure confident that that's a turkey. But if you're in these hills and you just see some leaves pushed to the side, be careful, because there's a bunch of animals, and that's not just for the hills. That goes for everywhere. But there are a bunch of animals that will, kick leaves around looking for food underneath, and it can get a little bit confusing. Okay, so that's all from sunup to sundown, or even, if for whatever reason you're walking around the middle of the woods at nighttime, you're going to be implementing those practices. But a key thing that I like to do, especially a few weeks before season starts, is, and sometimes it works really, really well. Sometimes you can actually, and this goes back to being careful how close you get to those roost sites, because this one can come back and kick you in the butt just a little bit. But I like to take a locator call with me, or just use my natural voice. But I like to take a locator call with me, and right before sundown. So when, let's say that sun starts cresting over and you're looking at a beautiful sunset, right? It's gorgeous. Take it in, enjoy it, but also pull that locator call out and hit it real quick, and see if you can get one to gobble on the roost. especially if they're really active in your area. Sometimes you can just stand there and listen and they'll give themselves away. And honestly, I prefer that. I always prefer to let nature take its course and let it happen naturally. But if you're not hearing anything, just hit a little hoot owl call real quick, or a coyote. I try to stay away from, ground predators too terribly much, but a little hoot owl call, just a little one. I'm not saying sit there and wail on the thing, but hit it and see if something will gobble. Okay. And if it does gobble, this is probably the most important aspect, in my opinion, of scouting. And that's to log it. And however you log it, however you're comfortable with logging it, that is fine. If you have, the Fort Knox brain where you can remember every little detail of every little thing that you do throughout the day, that's great. Power to you. I'm here for it. But if you're like me and you see way too many pieces of timber or way too many different hunting properties, it starts getting a little bit mundane. Mundane's not the right word. It gets confusing, right? When I see so many different rolls and hills and so on and so forth, I use, like I was saying, I use Onyx Maps. You don't have to use that. I'm not sponsored or affiliated with them in any way. I'm just telling you that it works really well for me. You've got apps like Spartan Forge, so on and so on, or even Google Maps, or even if maybe you're an old timer, and I say that with love, just now getting into turkey hunting, and you feel better with a paper map, by all means do it. But record what you saw or heard, where you saw it or heard it, when, like so, and that gets important for what I'm going to get into here in a minute. Like so, the time of day, the date, and if you have the ability to write down like a very brief description of, your weather conditions and so on and so forth, because maybe he screams his full head off when it's 42 degrees and he's on the limb and there's not a cloud in the sky and there's a slight breeze blowing. But when it's 70 degrees and, the air is real thick because it's getting ready to rain, he doesn't say a word. Turkeys have personalities just like human beings do. And there's certain times they're more vocal than others. And a vocal bird is typically easier to hunt than a non-vocal bird, typically. Now, there are some that they just don't talk, but they'll come into your calls. But that's a conversation for another day. But jot down as much information as you can, record it, and remember it, okay? Because that stuff will become very, very crucial the more and the longer that you're into this whole turkey hunting thing, all right? Which brings me to my last point of scouting, and that's historical data, all right? I have had probably the most success here on my home farm because I know what the turkeys are going to do at what time of year. I know beginning of the season, hit them hard. End of season, hit them hard. Middle of the season, don't even try it because they're not here. They're 2 pieces of property over that I don't have permission to hunt. That's not going to be applicable in every situation. Historical data can change, and it does change. So if your habitat changes, if you had a clear cut, a fire, whatever the case is, a drought, it doesn't matter. Example ABC, if there is a change, obviously historical data changes too, because that's not historical at that point in time. But if the environment around you is pretty well set in stone, historical data will take you so far with turkey hunting. And you're not going to have that historical data if you did not do your recording, or if you not able to remember it. I will literally, every time I harvest a bird, I will try my absolute best, even if I have to print the map out, to show the route in which from where I struck him and to the point that I harvested him. Right. So I know exactly how he came in. And that the reason I'm doing that is maybe maybe like if I'm sitting there looking at the map and I thought, well, why didn't he come on a straight line? Maybe I can take a hike out there and look and find, oh, well, there's a giant briar patch right here that he can't get through. Or, hey, there's a XYZ sitting here that he has to go around, or Who knows what it is? Maybe maybe the path was easier coming there. I don't know. But all those little details that you learn are going to help you in future hunts on that same piece of property. And it's also going to give you lessons and examples and ideas for future birds on different properties. Okay. So, and take that lightly. Don't get so hung up that there's only one way to harvest a turkey, because what I do here on the farm does not work on that same piece of public that I was telling you that's 30 minutes away from me. I have to hunt them, the two properties and the two turkeys, completely differently. However, every little tool that you can add to your tool bag of, oh yeah, when I did this in 2020, the turkey did this, or when I did this, and I called too much, he did this, or oh yeah, I remember back in January scouting this piece of property and I saw them roost in this pine tree over here. Maybe I should go down there, within a few hundred yards and see if anything is roosted down there. And a lot of times that historical data it might not give you the answers to the test, but it'll daggum surely give you a good study guide, if that makes sense. Like it's at least gonna put you in the game. And sometimes it won't. Okay, so obviously nothing is finite and definite in hunting. Everything can change from day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute, but it definitely gives you a baseline of knowledge to go off of when you're going into the turkey woods from spring to spring. Keep your eyes peeled all the time. I always keep a good pair of binoculars in my truck with me. I always obviously have Onyx on my phone. That is the great part about mapping apps for your phone. As long as you got your phone, you've got it. So a good pair of binos in the truck and something to record information with on me at all times. And then just set time aside. Don't go out on opening morning not having any scouting done and expect to be successful. You might be. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I always, always, always suggest people to scout. The more time in the woods, the more woodsmanship skills that are gained, the more knowledge that is gained, and it's just fun to get out there. Pick up some trash while you're out there too. If you got anything useful out of this podcast, hit that like button, leave me a comment below. I'm actually going to be going out this weekend to do some scouting myself. So stay tuned. I might post a video of the scouting trip, especially if we get into anything fun, and give you guys some examples. Hit that subscribe button. I sure would love to see you again in the near future. And if you have anything that you want me to speak on, please feel free to comment on that below. But until next time, see you on the hill.